Thank you so much for joining us here at Abu Dhabi Healthcare, Global Healthcare Week. In your mind, and obviously you have lived here in the UAE, what is the importance of this venture today for the country? Because this is a place where, frankly, they've been an incubator for innovation over decades, and that's just going to continue.
Yes. So throughout the history of tech, things that were considered grand visions and often the sci-fi or too ambitious to be reality becomes our reality today. And I believe that UAE has set forward a very clear vision that's incredibly ambitious and incredibly futuristic. And having that vision then leads you to actually make concrete steps and make it a reality. So if you ask me, the reality of the future of healthcare is very clearly going to be driven by visionaries. And I think Abu Dhabi will play a very important role in that future of healthcare ecosystem.
The PPPs, public-private partnerships, that's a huge part of what they're trying to achieve. To your mind, what needs to happen next? Because elsewhere in the world, we have an abundance of regulation, whereas here the decision oftentimes is pretty top-down.
Yeah. So we came here with a delegation about a year ago, gods of surgery, the world's best physicians, visionaries, medtech developers, and we gathered them together and we did a tour of the UAE. And their biggest and most impactful takeaway was we met with the government, we met with regulators, and they were very keen on collaborating, partnering. How can we help you? How can we prioritize patient safety and actually create an ecosystem that benefits everyone, every stakeholder? Patients obviously are more important, make it relevant for companies, ensure that we as regulators can do our job of ensuring patient safety. And just by the fact that they were having these conversations meant that there was a approach to partnership and proactively thinking of solutions as opposed to this is what we can do, can't be done, and that's it. This is set in stone.
Yeah.
And obviously when you're trying to create technologies that break boundaries, being able to speak to the regulators, collaborate and partner with them is incredibly important.
What kind of opportunities does this level of investment and buy-in, if you will, from the government give to your companies?
So we are exploring AI partnership, AI development, and we're also pioneering technologies in telerobotics to solve the world's leading cause of death and disability. For that to happen, a lot of elements have to align because we're developing technologies and we're venturing into an area where no one has ventured before. So we could consider this the early days of aviation, the early days of the Apollo space program, where there is a grand goal, there is a vision, there's a very clear north of where we have to go, and the ecosystem is helping us through various forms of intellectual and financial capital of reaching there.
Yeah. It's an interesting sort of dynamic, isn't it? Because if you take a step back and you look at how Western economies are planning or perhaps avoiding the inevitable, which is, of course, aging populations and a tax base that is shrinking, how they're going to pay for long-term care. Here in the UAE and in the region, you have, over 850 million people, almost 10% of the world's population, and in many ways an untapped resource in terms of an open playing field, if you will, when it comes to innovation. What are the opportunities that you see?
Yes, 85% of healthcare spending goes to 15% of the population. That's really impactful. Now, within the greatest problems of healthcare, 1 in every 4 humans in their lifespans will get a stroke. Stroke is the world's leading cause of death and disability. The economic burden today is $721 billion to the world economy. That's 0.6% of the entire world GDP. In the US, over a third of healthcare spending goes to deal with stroke disability. And that's just the economic cost. Now we put in the costs on families, the costs on livelihoods, and it really, in my view, is very clear the world's greatest problem. In 2015, a series of trials discovered that mechanical thrombectomy, essentially removing a clot from the brain, is one of the most effective medical treatments known to man. However, there's very few neurointerventionalists, and they're clustered around very few urban areas. So our solution is, why don't we think of healthcare differently and allow delivery of the world's best physicians to go to the patient. And that's where the concept of telerobotics comes in. We're very blessed to have partnered with Dr. Vitor. Dr. Vitor Pereira out of Toronto performed the world's first neurovascular robotic operation. And he's here in Abu Dhabi to pioneer and show in a public forum the world's first remote mechanical thrombectomy on a model trial. Now, in a real clinical setting, the patient would likely be a few 100 kilometers away at most, connected to a physician. But we are very confident that the technology has matured to a point where you could prove the feasibility in an exaggerated scenario. So Dr. Vitor will sit and live control a surgeon console that will operate a robot on a model 7,000 kilometers away in our robotics R&D campus in South Korea.
Which is something that would be virtually unheard of even just a few years ago.
It's the world's first by far. It's unheard of for us a few weeks ago. So this is very novel technology that we have decided to showcase in the Abu Dhabi Global Healthcare Week.
So when you have something like this, which is proof of concept, and you bring it to the leadership here in the UAE, this is something that, unlike in perhaps other capitals, they're ready to jump on because they do want to be at the forefront of these types of technologies.
Yes. So fortunately, they're here and they've said, we want to see it, we want to pioneer it. So I would say that they really view it as, if there is pioneering technology and it's very clearly being driven by the right stakeholders and the right physicians are behind it and there's a right validation, then yes, we want to be part of it. We want to help. And it's a huge impact to humanity. It's a big impact to the world economy. And obviously it could have a huge impact to the region. Stroke is one of the leading causes of death and disability in the region as well.
It is indeed. And in terms of taking this kind of technology and this kind of innovation and applying it to other issues, I mean, obviously the concept here has been taking the conversation from healthcare to a focus on health.
Yeah.
How do you see this kind of technology being applied in other areas?
So telerobotics is not new. There was a pioneering Operation Lindenberg by Dr. Jack Morisco. He operated on a gallbladder of a patient. He was in New York operating on a patient in Paris. So the concept works. However, there's a number of technologies that have had to mature to reach it to the point where it could be clinically practical. It's network technologies, it's mechanical technologies, imaging technologies, but more so than that, it's the human factors. It is who is actually at the bedside of the patient. How are they qualified? How do you ensure they're recurrent? How do you ensure that a robot is online? And fortunately, a lot of these issues have already been solved in space, remote walks. The former chief of robotics for NASA is advising us, a former astronaut, as well as aviation. So aviation has very clear parameters for which airports are online under certain parameters for certain aircraft in a different meteorological setting. And then when you combine all those parameters, it basically says this aircraft, this pilot can operate on this or this runway under these conditions or not. And then we have to, as a healthcare system, establish those parameters and enter this new era of healthcare with eyes wide open and really answer those questions that might be the most relevant questions that we should answer today because of both the effectiveness of the cure, because of the scale of the problem, and because the cure is incredibly time sensitive and it's also incredibly transformative for the families of the patients that receive it.
No doubt. It's great to have you here at Abu Dhabi Global Healthcare Week. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.